For years, travelers around the world heard the same thing about Japan. It was supposed to be one of the most fascinating countries on earth, but many people also believed it was one of the most expensive places they could possibly visit. That reputation became so widespread that countless travelers removed Japan from their travel plans before they ever looked at actual prices. Many simply assumed a trip to Japan would cost far more than destinations elsewhere in Asia. Then something unexpected started happening. Tourists began arriving in Japan and discovering that the reality often looked very different from what they had imagined. Many travelers found themselves standing in front of restaurant menus, hotel booking confirmations, and transportation options wondering if they had made a mistake. The prices were often far lower than they expected. For some visitors, the biggest shock was not that Japan was expensive. The biggest shock was realizing that certain parts of Japan felt surprisingly affordable compared to what they were paying back home. This is one reason Japan has become such a popular destination for international travelers in recent years. People arrive expecting one experience and frequently leave talking about something completely different. Part of the surprise comes from how much Japan's image was shaped during previous decades. For many years, Japan was regularly described as one of the world's most expensive countries. That reputation never completely disappeared. Even today, many travelers still carry those assumptions with them before boarding their flight. The moment they arrive, however, many begin noticing a very different picture. Everyday expenses often become the first clue that expectations and reality are not always the same thing. A traveler might buy a meal, grab a drink, or spend a day exploring a city and quickly realize that the total cost feels more reasonable than anticipated. Those experiences start adding up surprisingly fast. One of the biggest areas of surprise involves food. Japan has a global reputation for incredible cuisine, and many travelers expect those experiences to come with equally incredible prices. Instead, countless visitors discover that eating well in Japan does not always require a luxury budget. Affordable restaurants, local eateries, and casual dining options can often provide memorable experiences without creating financial stress. This is particularly surprising for travelers arriving from countries where restaurant prices have risen sharply in recent years. What feels normal in Japan can sometimes feel inexpensive when compared with major cities elsewhere. The same observation appears repeatedly when travelers discuss convenience stores. People often arrive expecting basic grab-and-go food and leave talking about quality, variety, and value. Many visitors are genuinely surprised by how much they rely on convenience stores throughout their trip. What begins as curiosity often becomes part of their daily routine. Transportation creates another moment of surprise. Before arriving, many tourists hear about Japan's famous rail network and assume moving around the country will be extremely expensive. While long-distance travel still requires planning, many visitors discover that local transportation often feels efficient, reliable, and easier to budget for than expected. The experience frequently becomes one of the highlights of the trip. Accommodation can produce a similar reaction. Travelers who spend months researching Japan often prepare themselves for very high hotel costs before discovering that options vary far more than they anticipated. Some visitors choose luxury hotels. Others prefer business hotels, smaller properties, or budget-friendly options that allow them to stay in convenient locations without spending a fortune. The result is that many travelers find a wider range of choices than they expected. Japan often feels more flexible than the reputation suggests. What makes this even more interesting is that travelers are not only comparing Japan with other Asian destinations. Increasingly, they are comparing Japan with their own cities back home. A growing number of visitors arrive from countries where everyday costs have increased dramatically over recent years. Those comparisons naturally shape how people experience prices during their trip. A meal that once seemed expensive may suddenly feel reasonable. A hotel room that would have been considered costly years ago may now appear competitive compared with prices elsewhere. This shift in perception helps explain why so many travel videos and visitor reviews mention affordability. The discussion is often less about Japan becoming cheap and more about changing comparisons around the world. Of course, not everything in Japan feels inexpensive. Travelers quickly discover that certain experiences can still carry significant costs depending on where they go and what they choose to do. Luxury hotels, premium restaurants, exclusive attractions, and peak travel periods can still have a noticeable impact on any travel budget. Japan offers opportunities to spend as much as a visitor wants. The difference is that many travelers discover they also have options. Flexibility often becomes one of the biggest surprises of the entire trip. Another factor that catches visitors off guard is how comfortable Japan can feel for independent travel. Many travelers arrive expecting complexity and leave impressed by how manageable the experience actually feels. This matters because convenience often affects how people view value. When transportation works smoothly and daily travel feels straightforward, visitors frequently feel they are getting more from their budget. Many first-time visitors experience this realization within the first few days. The trip begins to feel less intimidating and more accessible than they originally imagined. As travelers move between Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, and other destinations, they often continue making the same observation. Japan's reputation and Japan's reality do not always match perfectly. The interesting thing is that this surprise often spreads beyond prices. Once expectations begin changing in one area, travelers start questioning other assumptions they carried with them before arriving. Some expected crowded cities and discover peaceful neighborhoods. Others expected formality and find warmth, hospitality, and helpfulness throughout their journey. The longer the trip continues, the more these small surprises accumulate. Each experience gradually reshapes the way visitors think about the country. That may be one reason Japan generates such strong word-of-mouth recommendations. Travelers frequently return home talking about discoveries they never expected to make. Many of those conversations eventually lead back to the same topic. People simply cannot believe that Japan felt more affordable than they anticipated. What makes 2026 particularly interesting is that this discussion continues growing among international travelers. More people are sharing experiences, comparing costs, and challenging assumptions that have existed for years. As a result, new visitors are arriving with a different mindset than previous generations. Instead of asking whether Japan is too expensive, many are asking whether the old reputation still applies. For countless travelers, the answer is far more complicated than they expected. Japan can certainly be expensive, but it can also be surprisingly accessible depending on how a trip is planned. That balance may be one of the country's greatest strengths as a destination. It offers world-class experiences while still providing options for a wide range of travel styles and budgets. The result is a travel experience that frequently exceeds expectations. Visitors arrive prepared for one reality and often leave with a completely different perspective. And once travelers begin questioning old assumptions about Japan, many find themselves asking another fascinating question that is becoming increasingly common among international visitors. If Japan feels more affordable than expected, why are so many travelers now choosing Japan over other destinations they once considered cheaper?